Hey everyone, Wags here from Eagle Dynamics. In this DCS AH-64D video, we're back on the Fire Control Radar, or the FCR. We're going to go over the radar map or RMAP mode. Now, just like the FCR GTM mode we discussed earlier, we can still use the FCR to detect and classify ground targets in low-flying aircraft, but we'll also be able to generate radar image of the terrain ahead of us to provide target references and situational awareness. Let's get started. Okay, so let's talk about RMAP for the FCR. First, let's set up a few systems. Here on the TSD, I'm going to go to my map options. From type, I'm going to switch from chart to digital, and color band from none to relation to aircraft altitude. And bring in my scale. And we can see here's a large mountain here to our right, and a little further back, a smaller one to the left, which you can see also here ahead of us. Let's switch the TDAC to FCR, arm up the aircraft, and now let's bring the FCR to life on the left display. So FCR, utility, we're going to unpin the mast mounted assembly. Let's override the bit, save some time, and then back to the SCR page. So we can see that the current site is HMD, which we talked about in countless videos before. So just like we talked about before, we're going to switch the site from HMD to SCR using the site select switch. And it defaults to GTM mode. Now let's take a look at some of the controls, like selecting the FCR mode. So escape. Just controls. So everything I'm doing today is in regards to CPG, but you can do the same things I'm going to be talking about here in a second from the pilot seat on the collective mission grip. So CPG, let's go left hand grip on the TDAC. And the big one here is LHG for left hand grip, FCR mode switch. First we have ATM, air targeting mode, almost done, but not quite ready for the next update. GTM, which we talked about ad nauseum in previous videos. RMAP, which is our love for the day. And TPM mode, which is the last mode we'll do a little bit later. Let's go right hand grip. And just like we did with the TAD, we also have FCR scan switch size for medium, narrow, wide, and zoom, which we'll take a look at here in a minute as well. Coming back out. Okay, so GTM, let's go to RMAP, and here we are. Let's talk about some of the different symbology we have up here on the TDAC where you can see it most clearly. So in the center we have this big box, and this is called our FCR footprint. In wide mode, it's 45 degrees to a side, a total of 90, and at the top it's 8 kilometers, and we have intermediate of 6, 4, and 2, and even between those we have markers between those ranges. At the top, of course, we have our heading tape. We have the ability to do C-scope, zoom. Zoom, of course, only if you're not transmitting. Actually, I love me some C-scope. I'm going to enable that. Acquisition source, our data block at the bottom, elevation, either auto or manual, which we'll take a look at here in a little bit, and the setting of the target. Let's go ahead and do a single burst scan, see what's ahead of us. So notice that we have the same type of target identifier or classification as you did with GTM. So we have the large diamond for our next to shoot, or NTS, and the large triangle for alternate next to shoot, or ANTS. We can adjust the display a little bit with the brightness of the display, but more importantly with the video. It's still pretty dark here, and this is correct when you're very low altitude like this. What we'll see later in the video is as you gain altitude, you get a lot better picture of the terrain using RMAP mode. But for now, here at only 60 feet, it's pretty limited. What we can see is a pretty large mountain return here ahead of us to the right, and a little further back and to the left, a smaller one, which again, it matches what we see here on the TSD, as well as up here ahead of us. And we can make out that we have a couple targets, maybe 3, in the valley between them. which also you can see here as well. Another scan. You also notice that we have our radio frequency handoff, our RFHO. At the top, in the very center, we have a tick mark for the FCR scan center. And when you make a scan, it's going to stay stabilized on that azimuth. So as you maneuver the aircraft, it's not going to follow the scan with you. Also, we have markers. The outside marker here is the medium azimuth. Then we have narrow, and then we have zoom. And assuming that you are not actively scanning, you can switch those. So medium, narrow, and zoom. And as you might imagine, the more narrow the scan, the faster the updates. Let's go back to wide. WAS or Hellfire. And let's send one downrange. Okay, now like I promised, with an increase in altitude, we'll get better definition. So let's do that now. I'm going to ask George to bring us up to 250 feet. Thankfully, I'm in a pretty light aircraft today.
Coming up. At requested altitude.
Okay, we're going to perform a single burst scan again. Let's take a look at the difference in the detail and definition of the terrain. And I think you agree, quite a bit better. You also notice that vertical sweeping line, that's the FCR wiper for both near and far scans. So we see much better detail of the terrain. We can actually see more targets because we have a higher vantage point. We also notice these large black areas. These are kind of dead zones that are being terrain masked by the mountains ahead of us. So we have no idea what's actually there. So always beware what could be hiding in such a dead zone. Just be careful about that. Now, because we have these classifications, we can carry this over by switching to a different mode like GTM. So if we go to GTM now, we see the same classifications and detections. Go back to RMAP, same thing. Let's go to, say, a narrow scan. Let's go continuous. Of course, we can use the NTS function to switch our next to shoot. We could also use the link function, which we talked about in an earlier video. So link, we see the L now next to FCR. Go to TAS. And let's send a Hellfire over this guy. And again, you'll notice that the symbology, just like a GTM mode. Going back to the FCR page for a second. Now, an automatic elevation control does a pretty good job of giving you a good picture, but there may be circumstances where you have, say, a black area at the top or at the bottom, meaning that your elevation is either looking too high or too low. In that case, you can use a manual elevation control to remedy that. So in this case, let's go to the display, elevation, to manual. Let's say go down one notch, rescan. You can see now I'm looking too low, and at the top it's black, indicating that I'm looking too far down and I'm missing terrain at a little higher elevation. But I want to go back to automatic. Again, utility, elevation controls in manual, back to auto, back to the page, rescan, and we're good to go. So as you can see, the biggest advantages of RMAP, particularly at night or in bad weather, it gives you a really good indication of where targets are in relation to the terrain, but also gives you a much better situational awareness around you at night and in bad weather. So folks, I very much hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.